afternoon in downtown Honolulu, folks. Ted Ralston here, your host at ThinkTech Hawaii on the show Where the Road Leads. This show, as all of you know, is totally defined by the high quality of the guests we bring in. Our guest today is none other than Jay Fidell.
Oh, wow. Oh, gosh.
How are you?
How do you respond to that?
Expectations aren't set too high, are they? Okay. So anyway, we're going to be talking about one of our subjects that we deal with here almost all the time. That's drones, UAVs, UASs, which is where this program began, and your interest, and it's moving so fast and in so many directions, Jay. It's a fascinating aspect.
You know, but there are concerns and fears
there are concerns
that have to be alleviated, especially when you realize that drones can be lethal. And a kid in Connecticut can make a lethal drone. Anybody can make a lethal drone. So if I'm David Ige and I see the drone flying over my head at the Lantern Festival, I am really scared. I think maybe there's somebody out for me. And next week there could be actually.
Well, I would say you might want to speak about it in your own particular case. I'm sure there's somebody out after you. Probably for a good reason, right?
But you know, I mean, it happens in the Middle East all the time. Drones
Sure.
are used to kill people.
Yeah.
And so we can't take that risk. I mean, it's a terrorist's delight. So what do you do? Well, now, if I were king of the universe, for your thought, commentary, for your reaction, if I were king of the universe, what I would say is, you want to have a drone, you have to have a certain gizmo on the drone. If you don't have this gizmo on the drone, we're going to put you in jail. It's serious. Now, the gizmo that I'm talking about is a self-destruct gizmo.
Jay, just as we don't allow monologues on this show. You know that.
You can ask me later what I was going to say.
Okay. So what I was going to do is react to what you just said. What would we do about this? How do we take advantage of the benefits and also minimize the disruptions and the adverse aspects? How we do it is on this show. This show is the greatest output of information, and people can write to the show and ask questions. We can have people come on the show as guests.
ThinkTech HI is our Twitter name.
Do that again?
ThinkTech HI. You can send us a tweet, and a question or a comment, and we promise to respond to it.
There you go. ThinkTech
HI. That's the Twitter handle.
That's the Twitter handle. Now, you recognize that I didn't all say those words really clearly, right? So I don't understand Twitter myself.
You're doing fine,
Do you understand
Ted.
Twitter? You do Twitter?
Well enough.
You tweet? Seriously?
Yes.
Oh, all right. Well, there's the age difference, I guess. Generation gap.
You must be way older than you look. What can I say?
I don't think so. So anyway, we're talking about using this show as a way to bring information to the public and then get the public's reaction back and keep doing it once a week as we've been doing. 2 weeks ago, we had Chuck Devaney on here. He was talking about the manufacturing and fabrication and modification of drones or UAVs with cameras and different analytical devices on them to do mission work in agriculture and seacoast erosion and such. A wonderful, positive benefit. We had Tim Lerma from Hilo on last week on the show, and he was coming in by Skype, and we talked about his commercial operation. And in fact, I've got a picture here, which I can, I'm sure he would, Tim, you won't mind me showing this picture, will you? We'll just show you what a real drone operation looks like. And so if the camera can zoom in on this is Tim Lerma's operation in Hilo as of August 1st. We've got all the things in place that define a legitimate operation that avoids the adverse factors that you were just speaking of, Jay. We've got documentation in place here, which is the certificates of authority and exemptions and the state licenses. We've got people that are trained in the proper way of communicating with the tower and such. We've got warning signs and indications that this is in operation. Everything you could want in a way to properly define an operation is here. This isn't the issue. The issue is, as you were pointing out, the folks who aren't doing it that way, the folks who either don't know, haven't been educated, and this is also not a monologue, so interrupt anytime you want. How do we protect against the adverse emergence of malicious behavior?
This is Gizmo.
Oh, this gizmo. Let's talk about this gizmo.
About that big.
All right. I've seen them. I've seen gizmos about that big.
They don't exist yet, but wait.
Okay.
And this gizmo is sort of a control on the drone. It overrides anything else you might do. And it can either be a navigational thing where somebody, the government, for example, who is authorized, can say that drone's in the wrong place at the wrong time. I am going to bring that drone down. Or potentially, I'm going to blow that drone up. There's an explosive charge in there, and we're going to blow it up. Something that will neutralize the drone. And it's controlled by somebody who's authorized. In other words, you can't fly a drone up there, okay, with irresponsible, without being responsible, accountable. And this would do that. In the absence of something like this, you can, and that's the problem. I mean, I can go out like that kid in Connecticut. I can create a drone. It's hard for you to track down exactly who I am or that I did it. It's hard for you to prosecute me. And what you've got to do is somehow bring that drone within the ambit of the law. And we haven't done that yet.
There's a couple of thoughts here that interrupt your monologue. And one of them is that for the good of us all, there is an organization called RTCA, which is a federal government operation that does standards for electronics and communication and the very things we're talking about here on this station. RTCA is now engaged in coming up with standards. So we'll get part of the answers through the standards part. The other part that's interesting here is that neither laws nor technology can necessarily affect behavior properly. If you don't have education and some motivation, some incentive not to do the wrong thing, you have no real control of the situation. And that's the situation we're in right now. The local law enforcement people haven't been given guidance. Guidance isn't clear that they can respond to with something that's not really a massive threat, but is only a minor irritation. It's somewhere in between irritation and threat. And there's no method of policing against that. The private guard services don't have any authority anyway. And so if you're a hotel owner, if you're the Hilton, and somebody shows up with a drone on your property, what are you going to do with it? What if it's one of these micro drones that fits in your pocket? Is that really a problem? Flying it around inside his room? Probably not. What if it was a 4-foot diameter rotor with big cameras on it? That's probably a problem. Somewhere in between isn't. How do you think about that? How do you manage that? If you're the Hilton and somebody's flying a drone from a boat offshore, launches it offshore, comes over your property and takes pictures and stuff, how do you handle that?
I don't know.
Really
are you asking me?
I'm doing a monologue, and you're supposed to cut me off.
Okay, well, I'll cut you off then.
I'm back to your gizmo. I like your gizmo idea.
First you can make a law and say you can't fly it over somebody else's
Unless you have Jay's
property.
gizmo on.
You can't fly it over somebody else's property, without having permission. And if you do, you can be sued. But a lot of people in this world, suing them isn't going to do much at all. If you can find them. And if you can connect them to the drone. You got a standard of proof. It's hard. So the guy offshore with the drone is flying it over the Hilton Hawaiian Village. That's hard. It's hard to stop him in the first place, and it's hard to punish him, if you were able to determine that it's really him. That's why I think of the gizmo. The gizmo would have to be with every drone. No drone could be sold or made. No drone components or assembly could take place without the gizmo. And the gizmo would be open for the police to push a button and destroy it.
So we'd have to have control in manufacturing and distribution, kind of like we have in prescription drugs.
That's right. Now, I'm not saying somebody couldn't cheat on that. They could get around it. But this would stop a lot of inappropriate flying with the drones. What worries me, not to make too much of a monologue here, what worries me is that we all know about the kid in Connecticut. We all can go down and buy at least some of these components and have this thing fly. We all can get the radios and command them as necessary, and we can tell them to shoot at something. And we know this happens all the time in the Middle East, where these drones either explode or shoot people and kill them. How much time do you think, how long will it be before a terrorist in this country, in the borders of this country, actually does that? Is it weeks or months? I doubt it's years. Somebody is going to do this. And so we've got to find a way really soon to control the inappropriate use of drones.
I think it starts with education, and it starts with...
It's not the ones who are educated or ignorant that bother me. It's the ones who have malice, a forethought. It's the terrorists who want to conduct crimes, who are well educated in what they want to do, And educating the public will stop ignorance and stop mistake, but it won't stop a terrorist.
What it can do, though, is advise people of where the boundaries are between correct operation and operation that's not correct. And so people can start reporting. We have neighborhood watches. We have various other means of identification. And if you see it, report it or something like that, click it, you get a ticket. And getting people to be aware of this threat and just simply responding to it is that's part of it.
You know, when you fly a plane, you have to send out, what is an RFD, some kind of signal, a direction, a signal about who you are.
That's a transponder. And that would be true for operation above 10,000 feet on a commercial aircraft. But
now, and that means that I know who you are from the signal you're sending. Right. Maybe that's another solution here, that no drone can fly without having a transponder at whatever altitude.
Well, an interesting thing here is that what we're going to talk about also on the show, maybe after break or something, is what's happening in the world of delivery. Amazon and Google are both competing for who's going to win the delivery race, kind of like the Betamax, Beta versus VS versus, what was it? We used to have videotape years ago.
Whatever.
That other one. There's two different technologies competing for how we're going to handle drone-based delivery. VHS. And within that competition, this very issue, this very gizmo, at several different grade levels, good, better, and best, will emerge. And certainly some form of technical control will occur of that type. There'll also be some form of licensing control. So just like we have with guns today, there's control devices that are associated with the purchase and the use of something like that that's lethal. And that similar model will occur in drones. And on the electronic flight management side, the RTCA will be managing that. The multiple states are getting together now to think from a legislative perspective how they're going to define the boundaries of correct operation. That will lead into this definition of what this gizmo can do. Certainly the gizmo already exists.
Follow my scenario, though, Ted. My scenario is I'm a terrorist. I don't care about the law. I only care about killing my victim. That's all.
And the only way, right, but that's true for...
now, you have to stop me. It's your job to stop me so that I don't use these devices. You know, because accountability is very hard.
So how do we do that? Okay, that takes a sort of a holistic solution to the problem. The problem isn't so much the UAV, it's the fact that you are a terrorist. And we have to correct you at the terrorist level, regardless of what you can put in your hands. And a drone is just one of those components.
Well, if I wanted to, build a bomb, I'd have to go get the pieces of a bomb.
Are you from Syria or something?
I'd have to get the pieces of a bomb, and it would be easy to establish.
This show does not condone a conversation going on here, by the way.
But if I'm a terrorist who wants to use a drone, I have so much more leverage, because these pieces, these elements of the drone are easy to get. I mean, you could buy them in a toy store, and I could put this thing together and do terrible things with it, and you wouldn't be able to find me. I'm controlling it by radio. I throw my transmitter in the ocean. How are you going to find me? How are you going to connect that incident, that murder, if you will, with me? It's very hard. A drone is a remote control device. I'm just saying that it presents additional law enforcement problems.
It does present additional law. Absolutely, it presents that. And it presents obligation on the part of the public to see this, which is not consistent with the way we operate the world, and report it. And it requires the law enforcement organizations to be aware of what the enforceable boundaries are and what the methods are for enforcement. And we're going to have to simply start small and grow big. But if you take a look at, say, automobiles, the same thing occurred 100 years ago when cars started out. Right now, how are we going to manage this thing? Well, you first started out having to have a guy walk ahead of the car, waving a red flag, to make sure horses were warned that the horseless carriage was coming through, and don't get freaked out by that. Your job isn't going to get replaced. You still have a place to go tomorrow. So we learned how to handle that technology and how to handle the behavior associated with it. I mean, a car is an incredible terrorist tool. You can pack 1,000 pounds of heavy stuff in it, and do some serious damage. And yet we've been able to manage that to a satisfactory extent. The same will be true here. Again, it's a behavior issue. It's the public being involved as this new technology comes forth. And we'll have to all work it together. But we have to start at the level where there's a value, and then if the value can be defined, such as what Google and Amazon are thinking about, the value will dominate, and then the technology, the gizmo that you're thinking about, will emerge in that domain, and that'll be all part of the informing process that tells us what's going on.
Why don't you take a break?
This is heavy stuff, to be honest with you, and it's mind-boggling 24/7, and I would be glad to take a break if you'll take one too.
I'll join you in taking.
Are you going to change your behavior over the break here and come back as a?
Well, during the break, I'll probably talk, but it won't be a monologue.
Okay. We'll see you in 60 seconds, folks.
Aloha, my name is PJ, and I'm the host of Hawaii Sports Update. I am very interested in local sports, and that's why I host the Hawaii Sports Update show. I bring in guests from Hawaii, I bring in guests from UH, I bring in guests from the community, I bring in big names, I bring in small names, I bring in all names that are community related and doing positive things, sports related in the community. Come join me every Tuesday at 1 p.m. here on Hawaii Sports Update. You can also join me on my golf tournament, the first annual PJ Sports Radio Show golf tournament. It's going to be held at Coral Creek. For any information, go to ThinkTech Hawaii, INC, and friend us. The PayPal and a summary of the event will be right there available for you. And don't forget to tweet us.
Your Friday afternoon entertainment is back here on ThinkTech Hawaii, folks. Ted Ralston, our show Where the Road Leads, with a fascinating guest. Always fascinating because of the different views that keep emerging forth here with Jay Fidell. Jay, thanks for coming on the show today.
Right, nice
you happen to be in town today, right?
I happen to be in town.
Okay,
happen
right.
to be in the studio.
Yeah, because you own the place, right? That's all right. Anyway, we've been talking about...
It's a non-profit.
Non-profit. You can still own it.
Nobody owns it.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that explains my salary, doesn't it? For my...
It should. But, you know, you might want to make a contribution, though, Ted.
Oh, that works that way, too, huh? Okay, well, that's great. Great to know. I wasn't sure how that worked.
Tax deductible, Ted.
Okay. What we were talking about just before a break was Jay's innate characteristics of being, say, a proto-terrorist that has been under control so far. Somehow the laws and the behavior requirements in this country have...
You're a glass half full guy, and I'm a glass half empty guy.
Okay.
And maybe you're right. Maybe everybody will sort of settle down on this, but I think we're going to have to go a distance and see some bad actors first.
We'll be here in 10 years having the same conversation, I can guarantee you. It'll just be in a little different domain of how rapidly emerging things are. But let's just talk a little bit about what is taking place in the world of drones in this really interesting concept that both Amazon and Google have put forward. And they've been open about it. They put it forward about maybe 2 years ago, and it began changing the national conversation about drones, quite frankly. Now we're talking about delivery of a six-pack to you or a book to your wife or whatever it might be that strikes your fancy at that point in time on a call-up half an hour ago. And this conversation has so changed the attitude in the country, seriously, about drones, from a very negative to, hey, maybe there's something positive here. And now, as testing starts to happen, people will just sort of roll over to that direction. But the interesting aspect of it is, how is Amazon actually going to pull off what they're thinking about? And how is Google going to pull off what they're thinking about?
Why don't you tell
Thank you.
people
I'm glad
what
you
they're
talked,
thinking
because
about?
I was doing a monologue, and that's not permissible here.
No, you said you've been reading up on it, so
Yeah.
what is happening with those two companies?
Okay. One thing just to always know, that they're in competition with each other for the most wealthy company in the world, I think. So everything they do is going to be generated in such a way that it promotes attention to their case. So there's discussion, and then there's executable reality, which may not be quite the same thing. But what they see is such a revolutionary way to address the air traffic system that it is going to take a long time to work its way through. They're proposing, both of them, that the FAA relinquish the control of airspace below 500 feet and hand it over to, or delegate it to what are called ASPs, or Air Service Providers. The idea is that the FAA's job is to take care of air traffic and commercial traffic and manned aircraft and airlines, and that their hands are full doing that. Don't tangle them up with handling the low altitude work where the UAVs and drones will be. Let an ASP take that on. And UPS or someone like that who deals in package delivery, let them think of how you actually manage that. We're talking about segregation of airspace. 500 feet and above is for manned aircraft. 500 feet and below belongs to the unmanned. And then there's different layers within that 500 feet. The 200-foot lowest layer would be for the professional survey and video photography and environmental sciences, where 200 feet close enough to the ground to get the job done, but can be low tech. It's not lethal, not risky, so you can get by with lower cost systems. Above 200 feet, on a gradual basis up to 500, would be increasingly more capable systems that are capable of high speed, point-to-point operation, progressively lower risk as you go up the food chain, all the way to the product delivery. So the idea is that this 200-foot to 500-foot layer is a lot of stuff zipping around with a lot of autonomous decision-making, a lot of good pre-planning, and a good rigid and robust air traffic management, sort of a copy of airline operations, just brought down, to that level. Yeah. And then below that is the lower competence things that.
So where would Google and Amazon be? What level?
They'd be both at 500 feet or below. Each has a different approach. Amazon is more oriented towards pre-designation of an airspace route and segregation as the means of avoiding conflict between air vehicles. So it's heavily planned, and the traffic route is reserved, and the aircraft does its thing in that constraint. Google's thinking more of a decision-making process on the fly, similar to cars that park themselves or other devices that use current sensor information to decide how to make a move.
Crash avoidance.
Crash avoidance, right. Yeah. And Google has some interesting...
But you could use them both, right? You could have them both. You could have the pre-planned route, but then you need the crash avoidance in case somebody gets into your pre-planned route.
And then the interesting thing in the Google approach is that what they're considering developing for drones can also reverse apply back to small aircraft and helicopters and manned aircraft. So there's a value in what they're doing beyond just the world of the drones. So it's basically delegated responsibility, doing what the FAA isn't doing, but taking that authority away.
So who would do it? Who would do this ASP thing?
That's interesting. There'd be there's, like anything else, there'd be qualifications for what an air service provider is, and if you pass the qualifications, the station could become an air traffic.
Well, I also feel that so could Google and,
and
Amazon. They'd want to be, because they want to create the structure that they themselves would move in.
And notice what Google just did. It just fractured itself down into a bunch of different companies so that it can take this air traffic management function and even work with Amazon.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Okay, so they're thinking about the business construct that enables this.
Yeah, that could easily be one of the subsidiaries they want to create.
Absolutely. And then that subsidiary could work with their competition, which their primary company can't. So that's why you break
and it's from a business point of view, it's pretty risky. You put a lot of money in, you're not sure what's going to happen and whether you make a profit ever. I think their stockholders didn't want them to take that risk within the larger entity. They wanted them to take that risk within an entity that was essentially a throwaway if it didn't work.
And this delegation of responsibility for air traffic design and management would probably be regionalized. What you do in Arizona is different than what you do in Alaska. So you can have a lot of local specialties that emerge that deal with a 50-mile radius, we'll say, because drones, frankly, aren't going to be beyond it. They're going to be constrained in a small domain. So a lot of small domains, each specialized to that particular topography and weather conditions and such.
So what do you see the challenges?
The challenges are, first of all, we're talking about very precise systems operating in, 200-foot wide bands. That alone is a challenge to the technology to make sure we don't have deviations in that. Secondly, there's a lot of weather issues right near the ground that aren't present elsewhere in terms of turbulence and wind shear and things. So there's factors that, from a weather perspective, have to be accounted for in performance margins, so we don't have a problem there.
Yeah.
Maybe the biggest thing is, who really has the rights to that air? Let's go back to the Hilton again. If I was the Hilton, I'd say, I'm not sure I really like the idea of having a lot of air traffic going over my place at 200 or 300 feet, carrying books and lau-laus
It's their
around.
property, isn't it?
Well, that's the question. Where does the air rights of a property owner extend and exist?
How high? I mean, for
How high?
example, can a plane fly over the Hilton?
Well, we know this,
The
they
answer-
do, on the way
They
to
do,
Honolulu
they
Airport,
do.
right?
And that's been the way. I mean, is there an altitude that's known in aviation?
Absolutely, 1,500 feet over the highest obstacle within a 500-foot wide.
So
corridor.
you really can't stop anybody from flying over your property if they're 1,500 feet
Yeah,
or more.
right.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
so
healthy.
that's-
But this changes dramatically.
Oh,
if
it
you're
does,
talking
it puts
about-
puts that down to 200 feet.
Yeah.
And so it opens this door to who really has what are the expectations for property
Yeah.
rights
We're going to
ownership?
have to make some concessions and compromises on this. For it
Oh,
to
or what
work.
if you're, once again, let's pick on the Hilton. They shoot fireworks every Friday, right after the show's over, by the way. And they're going to want to have clear space above where they can shoot their fireworks. They're not going to have a problem with somebody flying over and delivering his lunch. So airspace and expectations
So it's a
are,
right-of-way thing. It's a
Yeah.
priorities thing, just like ships at sea or aircraft in the air. Somebody has to have priority. And the other thing that comes to mind for me on the same point is imagine New York City, a city of skyscrapers. Some of them are well
imagine
over-
Kaka'ako, which is the city of skyscrapers.
A good example.
And, you know,
so
the-
now these channels they're not 200 feet, they're maybe less. And now it's going to fly between the buildings, and it's going to make turns around the corners at the blocks, and people, looking out the windows at these things flying
Looking
by.
down at them. as they-
Yeah,
Right,
well,
right.
sure, throw something, we never know what. So, I mean, through a city, and I think this could be very profitable, what they're talking about. This fast delivery in a city where the traffic is all gummed up, you can't make any real headway. The drone gets it to somebody in seconds that way. But they're gonna have to figure out how to get around city blocks.
Well, not only that, but also how to get around the other 1,000 drones that are doing the same thing.
That's electronic.
So you have,
That's the crash avoidance.
okay, you have the altitude issue, because there's a 200-foot altitude is penetrated by a lot of buildings. And so does the 200-foot jump up to 200 feet over the top of the
Exactly,
building?
right.
Or the antenna on top of the building? Secondly,
Maybe it's a matter, just a thought, it's a matter of saying, look, in a city, or when there are roads, you fly over the road. It's a public way, right? There's nobody gonna have a building there. You're not violating, property rights. And you just fly over the center line, you fly over a magnetic strip or RFID kind of thing.
that should be
that
part of
lives
your
in-
gizmo you want to screw on this UAV, which is that's a really
Possibly.
cool idea.
Possibly.
Now, there are some, once again, the air rights comes into the picture. What are the air rights over a road? In other places in Hawaii,
All belongs to the government. If it's a dedicated road, it belongs to the government. And if that's the case, you only have to talk to the government and say, do you mind if we fly over your road? And the government says, yes, for a price or whatever. Okay, now, instead of Google delivering or Amazon delivering by a truck, a UPS truck, who knows what, they deliver above the truck. And of course, there's a big question in my mind. If you remember the story about the beer, remember the beer?
yeah, up in
Was being
Minnesota or
delivered,
someplace.
yeah, somewhere in a frozen lake,
Yeah.
the beer. And the drone would go out over the frozen lake, and it would drop down in front of that little house that people fish from. And it would drop right down and it would leave the beer. I think the guy had to come out and take the beer off the little carriage from the drone. The moment of delivery sounds like it's a real challenge. I mean, how do you make sure that the drone leaves it in the right place, that the right person picks it up, and that nobody steals the drone in the process.
So you really aren't a terrorist after all. You're just basically a conniving thief trying to take advantage of somebody else's delivery system.
I'm looking for the problems.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out a way to avoid all the problems.
Let's go back to the city issue. That is a really compelling issue, but we'll take a break and then come back to that in a minute, okay?
Okay with me. Yeah,
all right. Okay. In 1 minute, folks.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on ThinkTech Hawaii. Center Stage airs every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course you can check out our archives on YouTube or on ThinkTech Hawaii anytime you like. Why should you do that? Because this is an arts show that I believe is making a difference in lives. We talk with artists of various ilk. We talk with painters and writers, playwrights, novelists, poets, sculptors, dancers, you name it, directors, actors, of course. And we don't only talk about what people do, but we talk about how they do it. And my favorite part of the conversation, we talk about why they do it. And it's really common on this show to hear people say, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And it's very common to hear people afterwards who have seen the show say the same thing. And I hear all the time that people are inspired by the conversations that we have. So why don't you join us and be inspired too? That's Center Stage on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. We'll see you Center Stage.
We're back live, folks. The last segment of our show, Where the Road Leads. Today, the road leads to some future use of UAVs and delivery services and all other grand values that we can bring to the public by that technology.
I mentioned during the break, and I wanted to throw it into the pot.
Okay, here it comes.
It's the hijack scenario. Okay, we know that somebody's got to control this drone. I mean,
this, by the way, is Jay Fidell, our guest for the day. Jay, thanks for coming on the show yet again.
Okay. Somebody's got to control the drone. Now, maybe a footnote to that. Well, maybe we don't want
to control here's the answer to your question. Go ahead and say the question. I'll tell you the answer is.
Okay, so I could develop my own radio transmitter, and I could say to the drone, I could find it, scan the frequency and all that, and I could find it and say, come here, boy. Come on here. Come to me. Come to Papa. And then I get the drone, which is worth some money, and I get whatever's on the drone. So, Amazon should not deliver diamond tennis bracelets on the drone because somebody like me might like one.
So the answer to that is there's two answers. There's the real answer and there's the facetious answer. The facetious answer I'll do first because that seems to be how we do a lot of things. The gizmo you wanted to bolt on the drone earlier that you said at one point in time, if the wrong things happen, it blows up. Okay, so there'll be a sign on that drone that says, if you're the wrong person, don't take this tennis bracelet because it's going to blow up. So there's the answer.
Don't forget the spring gun cases. The spring gun cases in the West, American West, where people would have these mountain cabins and they didn't want anybody.
Oh, so you have a gun set on the inside?
A gun set on the inside, and you opened the door and it would blow your head off. And the question was whether you're liable for killing somebody if you set up a spring gun, whether it was criminal or civil, I don't remember, but it doesn't matter. Whether you're liable for killing someone if you set up a spring gun that will only shoot someone who invades your property. So that person is a thief. Who came in there.
Not the U.S. mail, who's trying to drop off a big
package
for you.
Well, no, this is only somebody who breaks into your place. And the answer in the courts, long time, and this is American law, probably in every jurisdiction, is you're responsible for that. That's not okay. You can't use a spring gun.
Okay.
Spring gun, it's no permit, right? So the same thing, you can't use a spring drone either.
Okay, and you can't put that gizmo on that blows up. That's a
well, not in front of somebody, not to hurt him.
Okay.
I suppose I was thinking.
Well, a flash gun just to scare them. That'd be okay.
Would it? Yeah. Not if it hurts them.
Well, that's it. Okay. So we have that. Of course, that was the facetious answer. The real answer is once again an extension of what's called a complex adaptive system, which is what we're describing here. And there are methods of analysis and filtering that allow you to detect if the pattern you're dealing with in terms of navigation and guidance or command and control or even someone putting credentials into it are correct. And that can be handled. It's not a lot different than what we do in cyber or IT in terms of encryption and that sort of thing. So we can take care of the high-value cargo theft. A more fundamental problem before we get to there is just even running above the roads. As you run in and out of what's called an urban canyon, you get into areas where the GPS, which is used to do the flight management for many of these systems, blinks on and off as you get either reflected.
It doesn't work sometimes.
Well, it's, GPS is a bunch of satellites flying in orbit, right? And then you got to look at them from the ground. But if your look to the satellites is interrupted by buildings, and then suddenly it's not interrupted by buildings, or you get a reflection of the signal, the GPS position calculation can be in error, and rapidly in error, which then causes the command and control system to want the drone to move in the wrong place. And in fact, that's actually used as a thing called spoofing, where you can, as you were almost getting to a minute ago, you can replicate a GPS signal, get the drone to accept that signal, and then you can dial up where you want that GPS signal to go and cause the drone to follow. So there's spoofing, and there's urban canyon effects, there's reflective effects. There's also, in the urban canyon, there's, especially here with the high winds on a trade wind day, there's very complex turbulence situations in an urban canyon, especially down close to the ground. So there's a lot of physical issues that have to be dealt with, and they're chronic issues.
If Google said, Ted, fix those things. Here, take $27 million and fix those things. I'm sure you could fix
Yeah, I got a place in Bermuda that is a great place to do that kind of work. So, well, let's make a partnership here, Jay.
Well, that goes back to a principal question. These issues that we're talking about, I think these issues are right at the forefront of solving these problems. First you have to identify the challenges, then you have to solve them. And we can do it here. We're one of those test states, and there's no reason why we can't put our heads together and make some money in the process.
That is such a great lead into what I was going to suggest is how this wraps together. The FAA is having a meeting on the 27th of this month, and they're going to tell the 6 state sites, of which Hawaii is one, associated with Alaska and Oregon, what it thinks the opportunities are for the test sites and where it wants innovation to go in the test sites. And we are doing some work trying to get those statements pre-positioned to take exactly what you said forward. In fact, a professor at UH is in the middle of putting in a proposal. It's already been, I think the white paper's been accepted at NSF, National Science Foundation, and potentially onto the FAA, for the core of the Asimov core, we call it, the core of the computational intelligence at the center of that UAV that can deal with all the issues you've brought up. And it does it by using the non-computational math, but the math of what's called Kalman filtering, for those who might be familiar with it, or Markov chain modeling is another way to think of the projection. But there are methods of measuring these really complex systems in terms of, are the patterns correct? Is the pattern changing? Is there something I need to worry about? How is this error projecting itself forward, and how do I correct it? So whether it's a technical issue like turbulence, or a weather issue like turbulence, or a technical issue like GPS drop in, drop out, that can be handled, but it's going to take serious mathematical and engineering pursuit, and it takes a supercomputer like we have at UH, and we have 2 of them here.
Maui, for that
we have one in Maui and one in Honolulu, and the modeling of the various ways in which these things can be challenged, and so we can understand where the plateaus on the solutions are, so you have a nice broad solution that can very tolerant to faults.
Yeah,
that's what
the drones we're flying
about.
Now are primitive, really. When you think about all the intelligence that could be, that will be, that must be built into them.
Well, the ones we have today, as you say, they're going to fall into this category of very low capability, and they're going to be restricted to very, very limited use. If we're going to get to the next step, we have to get the reliability and the capability up. We can't have failures occurring
the risks are very high.
Lethality issues have to be addressed.
Take one of these drones from Google or Amazon, going down Kapiolani Boulevard, and it falls out of the sky, and those propellers chop my eye out. I'm going to have a pretty good case against somebody about Google and Amazon. What are the insurance risks? How do you stop that? How do I protect myself from that? How do they protect themselves from that? There must be solutions to all of these problems. or it won't happen.
Well, that's the general process of systems engineering-based mitigation on faults and fault propagation and correcting the faults. That's all been done before and can be done again. Every time you do that, you add some weight because you add a system on. You add a shroud to the propellers, for example, and that takes away payload. So the system scales up in size to get the same mission done. And at some point in time, the economics roll to a point where it's not going to work.
But then you look at the technology again, and you find a way to make it economic again.
But if we don't work that problem and make these systems equally reliable to what we have in the air today, if we don't achieve that, we will not have an economic solution. Because not only do you have the liability problem that you referred to, but if these payloads that have infrared on them or some other kind of advanced sensor are pretty expensive. And you can't afford to just throw away payloads by having one of these things crash somewhere. And you got to get the information back so that you can satisfy the customer that you're working for. So
just
reliability
thinking,
has to be there.
Thinking aloud about, dealing with that. You could have all kinds of systems that say, whoops, we're tilting too much, something wrong. Or, we don't have lift anymore, or one of our rotors isn't working, or we're going down. And at that point, special systems come into play.
They're called parachutes.
Parachutes. All engines stop, parachute pops up, and now it lands softly. At the same time, it is sending another one, a follower drone, if you will, to either pick up the package, if that's possible, right, immediately, like that, or to call a police car to pick up the package.
You're kind of a closet engineer, aren't you?
Well, I'm thinking of all the problems. You've got to answer all these problems. Yeah. Or to at least notify Google or Amazon that something just happened and we need to take steps immediately to protect the payload. There's got to be a number of solutions that I haven't thought of. But the notion is this is not insoluble. And if those guys sit in a room and like us and figure it out, they'll have an answer or multiple answers. And that's why I think we should sit in a room. We collectively, Hawaii, in this special test site.
That's what we're a test site for.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We should be in a room looking at all these problems and figuring them out and then writing software and making, devices and systems that will be worth a lot of money on the market.
You know where the internet came from, right? It's original.
Al Gore.
Right. Well, so did weather and so did blue sky, right? Everything came from Al Gore. But actually, it started here in Hawaii as the Aloha Net.
Yes.
And because it was a constrained environment and you could solve the problems, identify the problems, and the same thing is true here in the world of this form of internet called drones. In fact, really, drones are just another component in the cyber system. They just so happen to have a rotor or a wing on them.
Yeah. I think if you feel that vacuum feeling around you, it's the feeling that this is not happening here, even though it could and should, and that it's happening somewhere else. And those guys are trying to figure it out. And they're going to reach a level of competence, and scientific achievement that will put us out of the running somehow. And that will not surprise me, but I'll be sad about it. And you will too. So the idea is strike while the iron's hot, tempus fugit.
I like that. And as I mentioned, there is some really innovative work taking place at UH in terms of research proposals that are aiming at getting to the core of this very issue. And maybe what we can do is bring Matt Asimov on at some future time here. There's several guys along with him that are leading the way at UH.
Sung Choi.
Defining. Sung Choi, the whole bunch. Yeah. And about 4 of them, I guess we could, now nobody, it'll be difficult to understand the conversation, but we'll do our best.
Well, the conversation, of course, it's about engineering.
Right.
And of course, it's about physical devices and materials.
Well,
science.
it gets down to heavy math very quickly.
And heavy math. But what it's ultimately about, Ted, are you ready? Are you sitting down?
Well, as the audience, are you ready?
Okay.
This is it.
Are you ready? I'm going to tell you. It's ultimately the solution to all of the problems we've been talking about. Software. Artificial intelligence, really smart software. And that's what we have to focus on. That's what's going to take the day. That should be our forte.
That is exactly right. And in fact, the beauty of software is it doesn't weigh anything. You can put as much software as you want on a 1/2 gram circuit board and do all this work on board. So there's an incredible future here, again, as you mentioned, for Hawaii at both the state test site, at the university level. We've got companies like OceanNet around here who have a lot of capability that fits in the picture. We've got partners around the rim. It's a great day coming, Jay. And UAVs will deliver your beer and your tennis bracelet to your designated recipient, your rice tennis bracelet, right? You look nice with one too, it'd be okay. So,
Thank you.
and so anyway, we'll touch this subject periodically, and if we're successful with our actions next week, we'll have Dr. Phil McGilvery from the Coast Guard and Stanford on. He's doing some work on Lanai today. Lanai, by the way, Lanai. That is an interesting place for doing UAV work. We can talk about that at a future subject, but we should have Dr. Phil McGilvery here on Oahu on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week. And if the weather is not a problem, we'll be able to do some field work and then have him come in and give his views on this very interesting subject.
Good. We're only beginning, Ted.
Right. Now, you know what I always do at this show, Jay? Ask the guest to say in a minute or so what they would like the audience to most have remembered from this show. As the guest, Jay Fidell, would you please face the camera and tell the audience what you'd like them to take away from this show as the most important thing to remember?
Okay, it's not going to take me very long to say it, though.
Okay.
You know, there's a great industry possible. And we have this special test characterization under the FAA. And we can study computer programming. We can learn how to do this. We can be #1 in the country about it. And right now, it hangs in the balance. It's kind of a tipping point. Is it going to be us or someone else? So I think we should focus on that. So you millennials, you engineering students, you computer software students at UH and elsewhere, this is a time to look at software for drones. It's going to be huge beyond anything we could imagine.
And that is your story, and you're sticking with it.
Sticking with it.
I like that. Jay, thanks very much for coming on the show today.
Ted.
Great that you were downtown here on a day off and able to afford the time.
Happy admissions day, Ted.
Right, same to you. Folks, we'll see you a week from today at the same time. Have a nice weekend.